Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's webinar, State-of-the-Art Omnichannel Click and Collect and How IoT Will Change It, hosted by peak-ryzex, featuring Click and Collect, and sponsored by Zebra Technologies. My name is Steve Paul. I'm your moderator today. We have just a few announcements before we begin. This webinar is designed to be interactive between you and our presenters, and later in the program we'll ask for your feedback. You can participate in our Q&A session by asking questions about the information presented in this webinar at any time. Just type your question into the Q&A text box located below the speaker bios on the left, and then click the Submit button. We'll answer as many questions as time permits after our presentation. Slides will advance automatically throughout the event, and you can download a PDF copy of our presentation by clicking in the resource box in the bottom of our console. At this time, we recommend you disable your pop-up blockers. And if you're experiencing any technical problems, please visit our webinar help guide by clicking on the Help ? Icon on the bottom right of our console. If slides are not advancing, please press the F5 key on your keyboard to refresh your browser. And now on to our presentation, State-of-the-Art Omnichannel Click and Collect and How IoT Will Change It. Discussing today's topic will be Brent Felker, Senior Vice President of Business Development for Mobile Solutions with peak-ryzex, and Scott Drobner, Senior Director, Business and Market Intelligence with Zebra Technologies. First, we'll hear from Scott.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. My name is Scott Drobner. I'm the Senior Director of Business and Market Intelligence with Zebra Technologies. And today our focus is to provide a quick overview of trends that we're seeing in the retail marketplace. Zebra conducts a robust study of the decision maker universe as well as end users in terms of what's happening in the retail industry. These are called vision studies. They're meant to paint a picture in terms of where the markets are today in 2016 and 2017 and where they're going to be in 5 years. And what you're going to see is a lot of information that's culled from this reporting, which is conducted across several thousand decision makers and dozens of countries. In terms of what's happening, we're seeing tremendous change within the markets that we play in. We see Walmart acquiring a variety of different types of players. We see new types of startups. The pace and complexity of this change is fairly dramatic, and we're really trying to pinpoint where that next change will be. As a great example, a great quote from Jack Ma at Alibaba about where his next change will be in the next 10 years. They're going to be bigger than Walmart. And similar types of quotes from Walmart in terms of their capabilities to change. And if you don't respond to the change, you're going to be left behind. And we talk about change. We're also close to so much of the technology advancements, but we really don't take a step back to look at how much this change is happening. And you could see every day how quickly change is happening. And what we like to talk about is how quickly it could take technology to reach mainstream. And, we look back in time over the last 100 years or so, there's been a variety of different types of technology advancements. It took radio, nearly 40 years to reach mainstream, which is 50 million users in the U.S. Television, 13 years. The Internet, when we're all living through this in the mid-90s, it felt incredibly explosive, revolutionary, tremendous change. 4 years it took to reach 50 million users. You kind of sort of see the dynamic that's occurring here. 3.5 years for Twitter, 6 months for Instagram, the poster child for monetization of different types of applications and APIs, Angry Birds, and now the new benchmark for how quickly change is happening, Pokemon Go, 19 days to reach mainstream. And obviously lots of pitfalls in terms of user experience, how quickly the folks are interacting with the technology, and obviously the dangers of dealing with it. So the pace and complexity of this technology is fairly dramatic, and I think I said before, when we talk about this change, we look at Walmart acquiring ShoeBuy, acquiring Jet.com acquiring five different companies in the last 3 months. Investment in Walmart Labs. I mean, really, retail history is telling us here that those that are unwilling to change, will go away, and we're seeing a variety of different types of retailers really being unable to address the change that's occurring here. So these are just a great example of the types of work and efforts that we're seeing occur in the market. So in terms of the study, this is the second annual retail vision study that Zebra has conducted. Zebra has conducted a sibling shopper study, which surveys nearly 4,000 shoppers across 19 countries in terms of what's happening. And this study, as you'll see, has been picked up by the Wall Street Journal. It's been picked up by Forbes, Retail Touchpoints, Business Insider, a variety of different types of publications because of kind of the uniqueness of some of the content. So this is meant to be an independent study. There's no understanding that this is sponsored or evaluated by Zebra. This is meant to be an outside-in view in terms of what's happening in the market, and it's focused on understanding trends in the market, perspectives from different types of retailers, concerns about what's working and what's not working, and really trying to identify which particular types of technologies and which particular types of workflows are going to change the most. And probably the questions that were asked the most is, which types of regions, which types of retailers are being most impacted. So, and when we broke down the study, we wanted to have a mix of decision makers that had purview over front of the store capabilities, back of the store capabilities, trying to identify which types of decision makers have ownership over the confluence of those omnichannel fulfillment strategies that interlace across both. We also wanted to have a good mix of decision makers across the regions. So we had 24%. So we surveyed about 2,000 decision makers. Around 24% were within North America. Around 15% were within Latin America, or focus on Brazil, Chile, Colombia, and Mexico. Around a third of our study are within mature markets, within EMEA, as well as expanding to some of the Middle East with UAE. And then about 28% are in kind of the hotbed in terms of what's moving in the markets. And you can see here, it's a good mix between traditional mature APAC and some of the emerging markets in Southeast Asia. All this analysis is conducted and segmented by retail type as well as by region. What we're going to focus on here is a global view in terms of what's happening. So, what is the major takeaways that we're seeing here? And obviously, the main element here is what we'll call the digitalization of the retail universe. We're seeing here, and I think we saw this nearly 10 years ago in our first shopper study, that shoppers are inherently empowered, more so than some of the retail store associates have been in the last few years. And with this, we're seeing tremendous push from the end user perspective for transparency, not just on pricing, but transparency in terms of asset visibility, transparency in terms of the value of their connection on loyalty. And we're also seeing a tremendous shift in terms of expectations. So how the retailers are reacting is that we're definitely seeing what we'll call the logistics, the T&L and logistics elements of the traditional manufacturing and T&L markets becoming center point within the retail universe. So we're seeing reinventions of supply chains. We're seeing different types of decision makers have ownership, which is really essentially changing the dynamics in terms of operating processes, what can be done from an automation perspective, and I think that's going to be a big term that you're going to see within our research, the dynamic around artificial intelligence, not so much from a robotics perspective, being able to automate some traditional manual processes. how retailers, and you'll see this continuously, how many retailers are really trying to push the envelope in terms of how they are enhancing the in-store experience, not just making it faster, but making it on par with with the existing universe. And then, obviously trying to personalize and individualize the process as much as possible. And whether that means for some shoppers being able to do pickup online, whether that's for some shoppers being able to check loyalty or some other type of gamification techniques, we're seeing a myriad of different types of processes in place. So the key question that I'm asked all the time are, what are those top 10 investment drivers, the areas and investment kind of sort of center points that keep many of these decision makers up at night? And this is meant to be a true prioritization, and we see this shift over time. For many years, we see, the push to get to greater top line. Number one, we've seen in softer periods the push to get efficiencies in their operations higher up on the list here. But the breakout that we saw globally was that really trying to compete with the online experience in an offline environment, as well as trying to link those together from a pure play, multi-channel, omnichannel perspective. Enhancing the customer experience was clearly one. Top line was two. Reducing overall operation costs was three. Keeping pace with competition within their retail subsegment, as well as across the broader channel. And then five, which was improving inventory management. Now, in terms of some of the big technologies that we saw, and we tested dozens of different types of existing technologies and technologies that are only at the first inning of advancement. And what broke out to us was in 2021, about 5 years out, three technologies were really looking to essentially change the paradigm in terms of focusing on these areas on store experience, increasing top line, and reduction in costs. 70% of retailers, 7 in 10, felt that Internet of Things was the driving technology that's going to shape their future. 68% felt it was some type of cognitive type of computing or some deeper analytics. It's traditionally tied to their loyalty operations, sometimes tied traditionally to their purchasing procurement. And then a pretty high number, 6 in 10, felt it was the influence of automation, either automation in terms of picking platforms, inventory management, or other types of inventory processes in place. This was a dramatic change. Obviously, in doing this for a number of years, the expectations for how much growth is expected in this kind of sort of nebulous term around IoT was absolutely dramatic for us. And I'm sure you're thinking, what does IoT mean to these retailers? Is it just this big, broad, gray term? And what the feedback that we get from the retailers, there's qualitative information in terms of quotes in our interviews that we got back there, but this was verbatim in terms of what retailers were looking to the technology to drive. We see a push for real-time visibility, utilizing different types of endpoints, and those endpoints could be, fairly cheap beacons, being able to customize information tied to shelves. That could be other types of sensors with either some other low power or some type of connectivity to reroute information. We saw a tremendous interest in extending the power of their BI solutions deeper into other types of associates. We also saw a variety of other types of techniques to simplify the experience, either utilizing video, utilizing kiosks, or other types of endpoints tied to these sensors. We also saw what we call, the digitization of the in-store experience. We were testing, a variety of different types of in-store experience platforms, being able to identify which particular technologies would grow. Nearly 81% of retailers felt that they were going to deploy security sensors in the next 5 years. That's a dramatic shift here in terms of siphoning out some of the traditional EAS spend that they're using for other types of technologies. What impact does that have on other types of technologies, things like Lane Hawk, other types of security platforms? Can they combine these solutions in one? We saw nearly 70% looking to utilize beacons, and we also saw a variety of other types of tracking platforms in place. I think where the most interest lied was being able to extend the data beyond either the point of sale, beyond the initial touch point, beyond the loyalty card. And there was a tremendous impact on utilization of mobility within the universe. And not just traditional mobility, either a ruggedized mobile computer or a cordless imager. There was tremendous interest in extending traditional mobile point of sale within the universe. Outside of some of the markets that we see, which would be traditionally some of the department and specialty hard and soft goods, we saw a variety of retailers that had payment a smaller piece of their overall process, really interested in the value of the technology. And there was a multitude of different types of payment solutions that we saw interest in. The mobile point of sale really went to the top of the list. Tablets, moving from traditional customer-facing or sales types engagement activities and use cases, becoming higher up in the prioritization for many retailers, using those much more simplistic applications, form-based applications across the board. And then the last one, which is, one of the areas, probably one of the most mature technologies that we've seen in this space, is the utilization of kiosks and other types of stationary solutions. I think we, as an industry, look back and forth. Where does self-checkout, where does that fit? Where does the screen that the shopper brings into the store, where does that fit? But there still is tremendous interest allowing users to be able to probe and to move a little bit more. So high interest in kiosks, really across the board. One of the areas that I think popped out the most is how much has changed in the last few years. In probing to consumers and to end users, their ability to share information. So when we probed, are you willing to share X amount of information with a particular brand? Similar type of study was at 9% in 2011. That's jumped up to nearly 60% of receptivity of being able to share particular personalized information. When we focus on millennials, traditionally the sample below 35 years of age, that's in the 70s. So there's a lot more data that the retailers have at their leisure, and being able to tie that to location-based technologies has really popped up. Nearly 50% of consumers that we surveyed were actually utilizing location-based technologies within their store experience. And this is really, I think, changing the dynamic in terms of what the retailer can do in terms of catching greater insight, really trying to have a better understanding of the value that the shopper is gaining out of the experience, and then which types of shoppers you can upsell and greater monetize, and what that value is. And we like to look at this as kind of sort of analyzing, the in-store dance. And you could see here how much of a jump from the black is looking at today, the blue is 5 years out. How much of a jump is expected in some of these personalization technologies utilizing existing location technologies? Obviously, we need to be, as an industry, cognizant of the needs and the wants of shoppers, but the robustness of some of these applications and some of these particular loyalty paradigms that have come out there have really allowed customers to be much more open and receptive in terms of what's happening. And we like to look at this as kind of sort of wooing the customer at the point of need. Another area that I think has popped up is when you look at the expectations from an online world and in a kind of an offline experience, there still is a high level of distortion in terms of inventory management, and the industry, McKinsey identifies that there's nearly $1.1 trillion that's lost in terms of really being able to identify product that the customer is engaged with and needs, and when we really bring this into grocery and look at the impact of spoilage, it's an even greater aspect. So when I talked about the dynamics around the impact of automation, it's really impacting inventory visibility tremendously. And you start to see here once again, the black is where we are today, and the blue is some of the technologies are going to be driving this. You start to see tremendous interest, an item let up RFID, only a quarter of retailers today using the technology, expected jump. Automated inventory verification, a variety of different types of technologies that drive that expected large jump. And at the end of the day, you really start to see value that the shoppers perceive when they go into a store, and that inventory can be identified either at the existing point of location, at another store, or shipped to their home. What we see sometimes is a 10 to 20% uplift in basket size if inventory is being able to be adequately identified. But probably the most, kind of sort of dynamic shift is kind of this move around this seamless click and connect model. 89% of retailers that we surveyed across the multitude of regions and markets that we surveyed plan to implement some form of buy online and pick up in store by 2021. That's a dramatic jump. I mean, we look at traditional e-commerce today, penetration rates in some markets in the mid-teens. That, my friends, is a real game changer in terms of the jump that we're seeing in here. And trying to quantify what that means here is more data being able to impact a greater influence on the retailer. So, we're seeing now what traditionally had been, I would say, more corporate HQ types of analyses being brought into these processes because of the multitude of unstructured data now that's occurring in many of these retail formats. So 73% of retailers, rated managing this kind of sort of incredible amount of unstructured data as business critical. 58% of retailers are budgeting for big data solutions for storing and analyzing this data. And the three areas that have the highest value is market basket analysis, centralized data intelligence, traditionally at the HQ level, and then customer segmentation, being able to take this traditionally deeper, because they're looking to adopt a much, much tighter multi-channel shopping strategy. And some of that is specific to addressing the pain points that we talked about before on out of stock. Some of that to do upsell, some of that for product availability, but clearly it goes back to the first slide that I showed you, which was around what is the top kind of sort of prioritization, and that is looking to improve the customer experience. And what shoppers will tell you and consumers will tell you is it's really being able to provide a much, much seamless omnichannel experience, and that's really where we see the highest interest. Is that 78% of retailers are citing this as their most important area, and nearly 76% are looking to do this immediately in the near term. So when you look at the particular that data-led analytics initiatives that are driving that, you start to see 70 to 80% across the board in terms of product level analytics that drive these technologies across the board. So it's really a monetization of the technologies that live in store. And what we want to know at the end of the day is how much impact is greater management of this data having on their channel fulfillment strategies. And I think this is probably the area that we get the most questions on is what does the channels look like 5 years from now? 65% of retailers are exploring some type of innovative delivery platform in the next 5 years. You start to see big jumps here in buy online and pick up in store, big jumps in buy online and ship to home. But I think the key takeaway here is that there's no one size fits all. There's a confluence of different types of strategies and technologies, which is going to create some level of chaos because there's really no one size fits all model. There's going to be some retailers are going to be replicating a particular type of strategy, and there's going to be certain retailers are going to go their own path because it works for their own route. This is very different than the channel that we live in today, and it's going to create a lot of opportunities. It'll create a lot of change, and obviously change broods disruption, and makes for a variety of different types of questions that'll pop up from any of these retailers going out. So just an ending here in terms of my portion here in the Retail Vision Study, some biggies that should pop out. 79% of retailers plan to invest in North America in some type of automated inventory verification. 85% of Latin America retailers plan to use the technology to enhance the customer experience. 75% of European retailers are looking to greater utilize location technologies to specify where that shoppers in the store, and nearly 80% of Asian APAC retailers that we surveyed plan to support some form of buy online and pick up at a third-party location, either be it a locker or some other type of neutral party. So definite different views from the different regions, but all talking to change and disruption within their existing processes. So I hope you enjoyed the quick snapshot of the Retail Vision Study. I'm going to pass this along to Brent Faulkner to provide a little bit more on the Omnichannel journey.
Terrific. Thanks, Scott. So my name is Brent Felker. I'm the Senior Vice President of Business Development for Retail Mobile Solutions at peak-ryzex. And in this portion of the webinar, we're going to start with a brief video that'll show you one of our existing customers, John Lewis Waitrose, a European company that is doing click and collect. They're really one of the most progressive and largest European e-commerce and brick and mortar retailers. They today do 50% of their revenue through e-commerce. 60% of that is done through buy online, pick up in store, or click and collect. Their goal for that is actually in 5 years to have 70% of their orders being made online and 30% in stores. So they're actually one of the one of the retailers globally that is actually designing their stores from the top down specifically for the e-commerce experience. And as a result of this, have really kind of one of the highest customer loyalty levels in the industry. So we'll start with this brief video.
We introduced Click and Collect in 2009-2010, so it's been around about 5 years now, and it's really grown from a very, very small and humble beginning to being our largest fulfillment channel.
Click and Collect on its own increases footfall. So the advantage for the business is that once people are across the threshold and in branch, which is a very different experience to what the retail trade is going through with online, gives people the opportunity to come in store rather than doing all their shopping online.
because of the great growth we'd had over recent years, then we're really stretched in terms of capacity within the Waitrose branches, and we also know that for customers collecting their items, it was taking maybe slightly longer than we'd have anticipated. So we looked at all the options within the market and really settled on something that would improve the capacity within the Waitrose branches, and also would allow customers, for those who wanted a fairly quick collection, to be able to secure their collection fairly quickly.
For me, it was a fantastically easy tool to use because it's so simple and it's so usable for partners that there wasn't really any issues at all with learning how to use it.
In terms of reliability, faultless. One of the key concerns for us going into Christmas was how well Click and Collect was going to work for us in John Lewis St Pancras. What's been outstanding about Omnichannel is it's worked 100% of the time.
Our peak period between sort of 5 and 7, we can do a click and collect in a matter of 30 seconds, which means that we can serve the next customer quicker.
No complaints, no issues, partners easily finding the customers' parcels. And in terms of feeding information to the customers, the great thing about the Omnichannel solution is it gives you a lifetime feed in terms of wait time. So we could manage customer expectations up front.
We had a queue which was potentially 50 customers deep across the sort of 23rd and 24th of December. And the feedback that I personally had from customers when I was handing the parcels to the customers was absolutely fantastic. They loved how efficient and organised that the queue handling was and how efficient the system was at handing over.
As it's our largest fulfilment channel, and really important to the John Lewis division, we know we want to keep investing in providing customers the right level of service when they come into a Waitrose branch. Some of that's due to technology, some of that's due to how we design and lay out the Waitrose branches, but we also want to keep investing to make sure that we've got sufficient capacity within the Waitrose estate as well to accommodate what we believe will be a continuing strongly growing fulfilment channel. So I think from a technology perspective we'll continue to invest.
Click and Collect is here to stay. I'm sure that it will be rolled out in different formats. It will be done in different ways as the years progress, but it would be something that is probably very difficult to take away and would have a negative impact on customer offer.
So from a capacity perspective and from a customer service perspective, then we're very happy. We also know, based on an awful lot of feedback from partners as well, that partners really welcome the opportunity and the simplicity in the technology. So from a partner perspective, a customer perspective and a profit perspective, we had a really successful peak 2014.
So obviously every omni-channel journey begins on your website, right? When a customer shops on the site and chooses items that they'd like to purchase and makes that purchase. So once that happens, the transaction, if you will, the e-commerce site feeds information to the order management system, where the financial transaction is performed, inventory adjustments, all the things that system does. So really, step one when adding buy online, pick up in store to your existing e-commerce system is adding that additional functionality. Now, rather than just saying I need this shipped to my home, I would like to pick this up at the following stores. That information goes to the order management system, and from there, that system sends a message for the items to be picked. And it's really going to go to one of two locations. It can either go to a traditional distribution center, where a warehouse management system would perform a pick, or more and more we're seeing people wanting to do fulfillment, at least partially, but sometimes entirely, from in-store inventory. So the order management system would send a pick, and that's done really today either manually. In some instances, people are actually taking printed sheets of paper and pulling items off the shelf to perform those picks. But more likely, they're using some sort of a mobile device, and it's directing them to a location. They're scanning a barcode on that item to confirm that they've picked the right item and complete that. Regardless of which way they do that, you can see where IoT in this instance could really enhance the functionality. So some of the things that Scott was talking about earlier in the presentation would allow for this process to be much faster and more efficient. So in this way, for example, you would have the RFID tag, which looks like a traditional label, barcode label, or even packaging itself. So it's much like the barcode, UPS barcode that's affixed to an item today. The difference is that rather than having to approach it with a barcode scanner, pull the trigger and read the barcode, there is a reader in the sky, if you will, actually in the ceiling, that will see every item that's in inventory right down to within 2 inches of where it is. So now we can see where those items are in the warehouse. We know exactly where to go to get them, and all of that information, including as they are picked, is fed up to the database that is housing store inventory on a real-time basis, or store inventory or warehouse inventory. Regardless of how it is, or where it's picked, whether it's picked in a distribution center or where it's picked in store, it has to go to a packing and labeling station. So here, the items are put into a box. The box is packed up, it's sealed up, and a label is produced for the box. Now, 2 options here. One, if we're shipping directly to the customer, the shipping label is put on for UPS, FedEx, whatever shipper that you use. The other option is if it's going to be picked up by the customer, a different label is placed on it, and this label has information with the customer's name, the order number, the number of packages that are in that order, just basic information. Nothing secure, no secure customer information, but an identification of those packages that are going to be picked up later by the customer. So I'm going to kind of take you through this process. Really everything begins with click and collect or buy online pickup in store when packages arrive into the system. So however they come, wherever they come from. So as packages arrive, you can see that they are scanned into the click and collect system. Now, if we were using RFID and the Internet of Things, those packages would automatically be recognized as they came into the system, whether it was a truck that was backing up or whether they were packages in a packaging station where items were actually collected at the store level. Like an Amazon warehouse, the IM2 system that is being used by the folks at John Lewis Waitrose, every single item is put away as it's received. So it comes in, the barcode is scanned. If this, again, were an RFID, we could literally just sense that we had received it, but then we put it wherever it fits best on the shelf. So, if somebody is ordering, for example, they ordered a set of golf clubs and a sports watch, storing those together in a location is probably not the most efficient way to do it. By being able to literally record the location for each discrete package and putting them wherever they fit best, you typically get about 30% more efficiency in the system. So you can store more packages. When the last package of a particular order is put away, is put on the shelf, and a location for it is recorded, an auto notification is sent to the customer. So the customer gets an email on their desktop, on their handheld, or on their their mobile phone, or on their tablet. What's kind of unique, and we're seeing more and more of on these types of solutions, is that in this solution, it's not just the retailer communicating to the customer, but it's the customer having the ability to communicate back. So in this particular instance, the customer can send an on my way notification. So either, again, from their desktop, from their tablet, or most likely from their mobile phone, there are configurable on my way notifications. They can be, I'll be there tomorrow, I'll be there in an hour, I'm in your parking lot, I'm in your cafe, please bring me my packages. But the idea here is that before the customer is standing there waiting for their package, they can give a heads-up notification to the retailer, so the retailer can collect those packages, and the packages are really kind of constantly moving in a direction, preparing for the arrival of the customer and the handover. Obviously, there are all kinds of IoT opportunities here. Beaconing is a big one. So when someone might walk into the store, rather than selecting a notification from their phone, they might just simply walk in and we know that they're there, so their package can be collected. So when the customer arrives at the store, they have the ability to do a couple of things. Number one, they can either walk up to a store employee and say, I'm here to collect my package. And there are really a couple of options here. One, when they approach that store employee, the employee can either scan a barcode on a printed confirmation if they printed one out at home. They can scan a barcode on a mobile phone. They can key in the customer's name or key in the order number, but it allows them to look up and discover which packages are ready, which packages that customer is ready for, or is there to pick up. The other option is to use a kiosk, where a customer could walk up and have a self-service kiosk to provide an arrival alert, where customer walks up, keys in their name or keys in their order number or scans in the barcode and lets the store know that they're there to pick up those packages. Obviously, that can be done with beacons as well. So the store employee at that point may have those packages for that customer right behind the counter. If they got an on my way notification and they knew they were going to be there within an hour, they may have pulled them when they had time and be able to hand the packages over. If not, though, they can go and retrieve those packages because we scanned every package and scanned exactly where it is in the back room. We refer to that as directed picking. We know exactly where to go to collect the items for them, so it can be done very, very quickly and obviously very, very accurately because every package is being scanned, so you know that it's a complete order and that it's an accurate order. There are times when it's not conducive. So, for example, a customer might approach and say, I'm here to pick up these packages, but there might be other customers waiting in line. And so leaving and going into the back room where you're going to collect those packages and coming back can cause some anxiety with customers who are waiting, not knowing when you're going to come back. And so there's also something that we're seeing, remote pick, where from the handheld device, rather than leaving the counter to go back and get the packages, you can literally hit a button that says remote pick, and someone in the back of store will be notified to go do the exact same collection process where they go to the location, pick up those packages, and scan the packages along the way. So, for example, they know where to go. They scan the barcode. Here you can see on a tote, that's the location tag. That could be could come to us, certainly via IoT or an RFID tag. But then they also scan the individual item, so we know we've got the correct package as well. And then head back to begin the handover process to the customer. And in this particular instance, there's a couple of things that need to be done. One is check the ID. Now, this is also configurable in the IM2 system where you can use a driver's license. You could, ask for the last 4 digits of the credit card used for the purchase. You could use a loyalty card. But basically, you confirm and check the ID. You confirm that the order is complete and accurate, and then perform the handover. So industry consultants will say that working buy online, pick up in store solutions, typically a handover from the time a customer identifies that they're there to the time they, pivot on their heel and they're heading away with the package in hand is about 9 minutes and 12 seconds. But with on my way notifications and directed picking, you can drastically lower those. So the folks at John Lewis Waitrose are actually experiencing sub 3 minute handovers. The last piece of this, and this is optional as well, is that you can just tip the mobile device down to the customer and have them sign on the screen with their finger. So you've now completed that process. And then the final component, and this can be an important one depending on how your system is organized, but it really is a reverse logistics component. So especially in fashion retail, more and more often on click and collect, we're seeing where people will order multiple sizes of the exact same item. So for example, they might say, I want this shirt, I'm going to order it in a medium and in a large. When they get there, they'll try both on, determine which one they want to keep, and refuse the other. Or they don't pick up at all. And there are a certain percentage of people who never pick that up. So you can configure the system so that at the conclusion of that, you can, or conclusion of a period of time that you determine, a week, 2 weeks, it automatically credits the customer's account or their credit card, and it reabsorbs that inventory back into the store's inventory. That obviously could drastically be affected by IoT and make it a very simple process to accomplish. So that's the end of my portion of the presentation. And if we have any questions, Scott and I would love to answer them.
Okay, well, excellent job, gentlemen. Great presentations, interesting video. I want to thank you very much. We're going to go to our audience Q&A, but before we do that, we want to just ask our audience to please fill out a feedback form survey that is on your console. You may have to click on the icon at the bottom of your console to open up the survey. We greatly appreciate it if you could complete it. It helps us to prepare for events in the future. Now on to the Q&A portion of our event. As a reminder, to participate in the Q&A, just type your question into the text box on the bottom left of the console and click the Submit Question button. We already have a number of great questions, so we can get started really quickly here for Scott. This is from Natalie. Which technologies do you see have the strongest growth over the next 3 to 5 years?
No, it's a great question, right? So, obviously the major element of our study here was showing the growth in IoT, and we found that nearly 70% of retailers were looking to leverage IoT technologies, and 65% were looking to invest in some type of automation for inventory management or planogram compliance, which was a big area of focus. And I think what the major area is that a lot of these retailers are looking to use their existing footprint for fulfillment, which is really a dramatic change in the narrative in terms of what's happening in the retail square footage footprint. Many retailers that we surveyed are looking to leverage their footprint and the real estate capital to have a greater influence in the e-commerce world. And that really is having an influence on data utilization and spend within WMS, within order management systems, and many other types of insufficient supply chain visibility technologies that are out there today. So really automation and IoT really hit the forefront because of the nature and the environment that they're dealing with. Thank you.
All right, great. Brent, here's a question for you. What would you say are the most common mistakes made when retailers first do the OPIS?
Well, we are seeing tremendous growth and added functionality in buy online, pick up in store in general. And some of the systems that I see people implement, number one, I see that a lot of companies are doing it manually. And the problem, of course, with that is that when you're doing it manually, you're not storing the items necessarily as efficiently as you could. You are also not confirming that you're getting a complete and accurate handover. I'll give an example. I work with recently bought a new home and wanted to put cabinets in my garage, so I made a 21-piece order for buy online, pick up in store through one of the big box stores, and I had to borrow a friend's truck to go get it. The store was 30 minutes away because the store nearest me didn't have what I was looking for. So I called ahead to say, hey, listen, I'm going to be there in 30 minutes. And they said, well, just come to the customer service desk with your printed confirmation, and we'll have it ready for you. Well, I got there, and they didn't have it ready for me because they didn't take my name and number. So I got there, I handed them that piece of paper, and I waited 31 minutes until they brought the order to me. Had I been able to do that in an automated fashion, right, given them a heads-up notification, I wouldn't have waited, right, and they wouldn't have been scrambling to get it for me quickly. They handed me 21 items and a piece of paper and said, okay, sign here for these items. But I went through and discovered there was one item missing. And that was because they didn't use a mobile solution to go and scan each barcode, so they knew that the order was complete and accurate. And then the other piece that I would say I see oftentimes is that there are systems out there that will work on a register. And I think that works fine for certain times of the year. So, for example, a customer would show up, they would stand in line at the register. When they got to the register, they would say, hey, I'm here to pick up my online order, and then it would be retrieved for them. But during peak periods, during holiday season, that is absolutely the worst. You got 15 people standing in queue, and somebody gets up to the front and says, I'm here to pick up an order, and the person at the register says, I'll be right back, and disappears into the back office or the back of store to go find that. So really, really bad. Customers are immediately frustrated. They don't know when the person's going to come back, regardless of how fast they do it. So those would be the two things I would say: trying to do it manually or trying to do it on a register rather than have it as a separate standalone, mobile device.
Okay, thanks. Let's see. How about another one for Scott? Which regions or region have been most aggressive in addressing omnichannel strategies?
Yeah, general e-commerce growth has been, in the 20% range for the last few years. E-commerce penetration in the U.S. is in the high single digits and low teens if you strip out grocery. But the U.K. sits on its own. It's nearly 18 to 20% growth, which is just absolutely off the charts. India also has e-commerce penetration approaching 20%. Where we've probably seen the most innovative solutions has been in Southeast Asia. It really has been, I think, mind-blowing in terms of some of the near one day, near several hour fulfillment of some existing solutions today. But I think the most interesting thing has been how much change has happened in some of the specialty markets. And I think, I look at a Brazilian retailer called Cool Beans, and they sell eyeglasses and other types of optic solutions, and it's essentially an online pure play. And they push shoppers and consumers to their store because they can actually only get those frames that are available for a 7 to 10 day period only at these stores. So we're seeing a variety of kind of innovative offerings that are pulling folks in their kind of sort of personas online, into the store. I think the area of greatest growth that we saw from our own research is grocery, and I think that right now less than 3% of grocery sales, which in the United States approaches 900 something billion, is done online. I think that's where we'll probably see the most disruption occurring. Obviously, there's a lot of gating factors in terms of dealing with of perishables and other types of spoilage, but the general view is that whoever can own the online grocery market has tremendous opportunity to disrupt the whole retail industry.
Okay,
Thank you.
We have time for a couple more, so let's ask one for Brent here. Do you see retailers fulfilling buy on BOPIS orders through both distribution centers and store inventory?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we do. So there certainly are many who today are just adding to their existing e-commerce strategy where they're fulfilling exclusively from distribution center, and they're just adding the ability to ship or to pick up in store. And so in those cases, they're just using distribution fulfillment. But more and more we're seeing that where they want to fulfill from store, but not in every instance. And so a lot of the solutions, ours included, when we're doing pick from store applications, has cascading technology in it. So in other words, we will look for the inventory where it's going to cost us the least amount. So, for example, in store. So, if something's going to be picked up at a particular store, let's check that store inventory first. Let's pick it from that first because A, it's not going to sit in the store for a long period of time unpurchased and wind up getting marked down. And B, we've already incurred a shipping cost to the store, and so it would be the least expensive to do it at that point. However, if that's not available, we have the ability to look at inventory in the next closest place or the next least expensive place to fulfill. So we might look at another store that's down the road, then we might look at a third store that's across town, and then finally we might look to the distribution center. So all this is handled where we look for inventory, we send a pick to an individual in that store, have them confirm that they do indeed have the product, scan it. Once we know they have it, then we notify the customer and begin the process. But if they don't, then it just kind of cascades down to the next. So really kind of blending in-store and distribution is an extremely efficient way to do it, and we're seeing a lot of that.
Okay, great. Here's another follow-up. How long is the typical buy online, pick up in store implementation?
Well, so that really depends. It depends on if you're going with an off-the-shelf solution. Ours is an off-the-shelf solution, and there are other off-the-shelf solutions as well. I can certainly speak to ours. We typically can do, well, first of all, we always insist on doing a pilot, right? But it's not a conference room pilot. It's an actual functioning pilot where we go into the store, we set the system up, store or stores, usually it's multiple stores, and we actually integrate to the picking system, so we know how many packages are going to be coming. We get a fully functioning system up and running. We can typically do that in 30 days. Then we do a pilot for 8 weeks. During that 8-week period, the retailer can see exactly how it works with real customers using it just in that limited or controlled environment. Once that 8 weeks is up, if they decide to move forward, it really depends on the size, the number of stores that you want to do. And the main gating factor, because a lot of the software is already written and the interfaces are already written, it's already been tailored for that or optimized and for that customer or for that retailer, then really it's a matter of the logistics, setting up the logistics in the back of the store or in the front of the store where the packages are going to be stored, et cetera. But pretty quickly, so 30 days to design the system, 8 weeks to pilot it, and then begin rollout. And we've seen, 300 stores in a 2-month rollout is not at all uncommon.
Okay, great. And then Samantha has just one last question here. Quickly, what are some of the primary motivators that are driving retailers to consider this?
Buy online, pick up in store, it's really, multiple. We are hearing more and more people saying, our competition is doing this, so we need to be able to offer this for a better customer experience. But also, it's upsell. It's driving additional traffic into the store so that the customer gets what they're looking for, but then buys other things. And then it's also the endless aisle, right? So many stores are limited to how much real estate they've got and how much inventory they can keep in the store. So this way customers get exactly what they look like when they're coming in. The Waitrose, John Lewis that we talked about is kind of a really interesting upsell model there. For those of you who don't know that company, they own a chain of grocery stores and they also own a chain of department stores. John Lewis are the department stores and Waitrose are the grocery stores. And their buy online, pick up in store is actually to buy John Lewis items from the department stores, but their pickup locations are exclusively in their grocery stores. So you can see just tremendous upsell because no one's going to go to the grocery store to pick up an item that they purchased without picking up milk and bread and all those other things as well. So I would say endless aisle and the customer experience are the two major drivers.
Super. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this live session. If we didn't get to your question during our broadcast, someone will follow up with you over the next few business days. I want to thank you all for attending today's webinar, State of the Art, Omnichannel, Click and Collect, and How IoT Will Change It, hosted by peak-ryzex, featuring Click and Collect, and sponsored by Zebra Technologies. Shortly after this live event, we'll send you an email reminder to access this presentation on demand. And on behalf of our guests, Brent Felker, Senior Vice President of Business Development for Mobile Solutions with peak-ryzex, and Scott Drobner, Senior Director, Business and Market Intelligence with Zebra Technologies, we want to thank you for your time and have a great day.